Hey everyone, Rho here. Today we're talking the gift of the Primaris and the unspoken failure that comes to so many. General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we are discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Well, since the introduction of the Primaris, the past few years have seen them evolve from fascinating new arrivals to the mainstays of the narrative. From their unveiling in the launch of the Indomitus Crusade, we've seen these warriors forge their way across the galaxy, forging new chapters and becoming much needed reinforcements for those already existing. It's not underestimating to say that the Imperium's continued survival is in no small part thanks to these creations of Belisarius Cawl. And as great as all that is, for me, by far and away the most fascinating aspect was the dynamic between the new Primaris creations and the already existing Space Marines, now known as Firstborn. The tensions and interplay between them was a real interesting dynamic. The embattled Firstborn obviously grateful for the assistance, but wary at what these new arrivals represented. The mere notion of them being an alteration to the Emperor's own design, enough to verge on heresy in some minds. And well, the differences weren't just limited to the physical. The Primaris arrivals from Guilliman's crusades venerated his name alongside the Emperor himself when reaching their new chapters, which was something absolutely incredulous to the lineages of other bloodlines. So too the fact that these Primaris referred to Mars alongside the throne world of Terra. In short, as much as these creations may have been from different lineages, they were still very much outsiders to many of their chapters. And this is where the Torchbearer fleets as well as the Rubicon Primaris came into play. Now, the Torchbearer fleets were dispatched in the earliest days of the Indomitus era, tasked with bringing the technology on how to create Primaris themselves to the most desperate of chapters across the stars, even those across the Rift itself, within the embattled Dark Imperium. Now chapters across the Imperium would be able to create Primaris Marines for themselves, new recruits fresh from their intended homeworlds. And alongside this was the revelation that it was indeed possible for a Firstborn Marine to become a Primaris himself, through the operation known as the Rubicon Primaris. Though the procedure was extremely dangerous, with an initial failure rate of over 60%, even higher for certain bloodlines such as the Blood Angels. Now, as we know, the first Marine to cross the Rubicon was the legendary Marneus Calgar, and as such many of Guilliman's bloodline refer to it as the Calgarian Rites, or the Calgar procedure instead. Since then, we've seen many major characters across the lore make the transition themselves. Helbrecht of the Templars, Blackmane of the Space Wolves, Mephiston of the Blood Angels, Uriel Ventris, and even Corsaro Khan, with many more out there still. However, now, it's actually arrived at the point within the lore that it's odd to still see a Firstborn high-ranking officer, at least for Guilliman's bloodline, and we know this thanks to a brief interaction in the Dark Imperium Godblight novel by Guy Haley. Now in this, as Tetrarch Felix is attempting to meet with the Lord Commander Guilliman, he is halted by Cato Sicarius, who, no longer the second company captain, is the head of Guilliman's personal guard. And in this brief interaction, we see Felix reflect that Sicarius is unusual in being a high-ranking officer and not having crossed the Rubicon. So it's pretty clear from Felix's experiences that Sicarius is in the minority now. And again, Felix's travels at this point have been fairly limited, but I think it speaks for itself. Now, aside from the amount of characters who have stepped up to Primaris, we know the procedure's success rate has improved thanks to talk of the procedure during the events of the novel Darkness in the Blood, again by Guy Haley. Here, Belisarius Caul's representative brings knowledge of the Rubicon procedure to the Warden of Imperium Nihilus Dante, who obviously displays an interest in the procedure himself. Such a tease. But anyway, here it's stated that the procedure has been improved since Calgar himself underwent it, and the success rate is now up around 60%, which, considering that was the failure rate before, is quite a substantial improvement, though still far lower for the lines of Russ and Sanguinius. And later in that novel, we got to see Mephiston undergo his elevation to Primaris, becoming the first Blood Angel to cross the Rubicon, which of course gave us that awesome new model. And despite all the talk of failures of the process, it's hard to envisage when you see so many of your beloved characters successfully come out of the other side. However, we have had a glimpse of the true hardships and price of failure. Now, it does have to be said this was not the crossing of the Rubicon procedure, but instead a chapter's attempts at creating Primaris for their own, receiving the gift of the Primaris from a torchbearer fleet. And this was in the events of the novel Spear of the Emperor by ADB, which, like I said on Monday, was a read that just absolutely blew me away. Really, really recommend it. Now, this isn't a spoiler to the main story, so fear not, but in this we get a fascinating glimpse into the reality of Primaris creation, one that's not often seen across the lore. The Emperor's Spears chapter are a Space Marine chapter with elements of old Celtic druidic nature, and as such they bury and honour their dead upon their homeworld within tombs that are called barrows. And in this novel we get to follow a character named Anarada into one of those barrows, and here, past all the fallen warriors and heroes of the chapter, she begins to find what she can only describe as monsters. And these aren't warp spawn or creatures from the planet, they're Astartes. Astartes with misshapen bodies, bloated limbs, and all kinds of physical deformities. And this isn't the effects of war. These aren't grotesque wounds suffered on the battlefield. It turns out that these are Marines whose bodies simply rejected the organ implants during their creation. And it's an absolutely fascinating glimpse at the realities of the Primaris creation. So often we're told of the hardships that go into creating a Marine. So often we see the success and heroics that they achieve. However, here is a touching and poignant glimpse into the other side of the coin. You might expect this to be a moment of fear, but instead, there's just an overriding theme of sadness. And it really brings you, like I said, to appreciating the hardships of these creations. You kind of just assume that the Torchbearer fleets brought the knowledge of these new creations, and bam! Instantly the chapters were up and running with these new amazing warriors. But in reality, it just wasn't that simple. it was still a very hard journey that, in truth, suffered many failures, as the chapters across the Imperium were desperately trying to adapt to this new technology. Their very survival's on the line. I've said it a million times on the channel, and I'll keep on saying it. These are the moments that make 40k just untouchable by anything else. For all its grand galaxy-spanning battles, for all its grim dark universe, it's these true compassionate glimpses that just absolutely make it what it is. These tiny reminders of, well, the humanness of it all. The Imperium is such a vast grinding machine, something able to fling out the Primaris technology to thousands of chapters across the entire galaxy. But within that still, there is still the simple human struggle for survival. It may not be quite the one you always expect, but it's always there nonetheless, even for these demigod warriors. But as always guys, what do you think? For all the talk of the hardships of the Primaris creation, do you enjoy when you truly get to see the glimpses behind it? Do we need to see more of the failures as well as the successes? For all the sacrifices upon the battlefield are the ones that fail to even get there, the true stories of sacrifice. As always guys, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. But with that said, I am off and I'll see you all again real soon.